Hello, I'm Ed and I'd like to welcome you to our podcast series, Tackling It Together, brought to you by Little Blackbird, where we will be having open, honest and important conversations with some inspirational guests. Hello and welcome to the Little Blackbird Tackling It Together podcast, and we are here with my old pal, Shawnee Green, and I want to burst into song there. Shawnee Green. How's it going, Sean?
Good. Thanks for having me. Yep.
Hey, you've had a full day at work, straight into this conversation afterwards.
No rest.
No rest for the wicked. How's life?
Good, yeah, in a good place. At the moment, yeah. No, good, doing well.
Good. So, I'm excited about this conversation. A little bit nervous, as in, I've just showed you a hit list that I had on my phone a long time ago, and you were at the top of that, only because I would define you as the human version of resilience.
Very kind.
I don't know what you like with praise, whether you like it. Well, you might have to sit with it a bit.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm really excited to have this conversation, because your perspective, you're going to give us lots of different angles. I'm not going to take anything away from that, because we'll get into all of it. But I think your outlook on resilience and how you've carried yourself through a number of challenges in life on and off that rugby pitch, and we played rugby together many a time. I carried you through many a game.
Yeah, one or two, yeah.
But yeah, I think you and resilience are very well connected. But I ask all the guests that come on this, first and foremost, why did you say yes?
Yeah, so I've probably thought long and hard, but that's more about how I articulate this answer, really, because as soon as you asked me, the response was yes. Yeah, in the sense of, getting people talking about a subject that is vitally important. And communication, for me, I've always been what I've deemed to be a good communicator, sometimes more vocal than others, whether it be on the rugby pitch or in work or at life as well. But generally speaking, I think it's important to do that, and it's difficult. That is the hard thing to do, is to speak open and be open and honest, especially if you're struggling. So that's why, hopefully I'll share my stories, my journey or journeys, and see if it resonates with people.
It's a good point, that, isn't it? There's one thing rallying the troops in the changing room and talking from a motivation point of view, but talking openly and honestly is a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what perspective we're going to get in this conversation then, Sean?
Honest, I think, is the key one. Yeah, honesty. My journey is just my journey, my story, or our family's story. It may be the same for other people, it may be completely different, but I think the honest approach is the best one, because to again break down the stigma and the piece of, real men don't cry, or boys don't cry, I should say, and a tough sport like rugby, you can't show your emotions. I absolutely think it's the opposite to that. Yeah, and it's very important to show your emotions and to be open and honest. So that's what we'll get.
Give us a bit of context with your sparkling rugby career. How many caps at Chester Rugby Club?
Well, I'm old now, so it's 406 appearances in total for the first team, which I'm very proud about. Yeah, didn't think I'd get to 200, let alone the 3, then the 4.
Well, the 6.
I know, yeah, just the extras just chuck them in. But yeah, I think it was 22 years of senior rugby. And probably one of the telling moments was towards the end of my career, when a couple of the lads weren't born when I made my debut, and I was playing alongside them. So yeah, I think now I've retired, the average age of the team has dropped significantly. Yeah. But no, I was really happy. Lots of injuries, but lots of great memories and connections and friends that will stay throughout, my whole career. And the vast majority of this place in Chester was where I came when I was 16, or 15 actually, so 15. So it's like a second home.
You're a bit of a legend around this.
Well, thank you.
Right, so resilience, vulnerability. Take us back to those key moments for you in your life where resilience was pushed.
Yeah, fair enough. So there's probably several, but two main ones for me. So back in 2013, so me and Cara got married in March. end of March, great wedding. Believe it or not, it snowed at the end of March as well, so that was interesting. We didn't plan for the snow.
You didn't plan
the day before it snowed as well, so we had a snowball fight on a wedding day, so it was kind of nice for the pictures. And then fast forward a couple of months, you know, we were happy-go-lucky, very settled, wanting to get married and then start a family. I think that was the key thing, and we were fortunate to get pregnant a couple of months later. And then that was kind of the start of one of the journeys ultimately. And you go through the various, you know, pregnancy tests, elation, everything's brilliant. And then when we got into more of the kind of, I think it was a 16-week check, at that point, they kind of uncovered that, okay, there were some potential complications with this pregnancy without going into too much detail. So from that point onwards, it was very closely monitored, and to the point of almost, well, towards the latter stages was kind of weekly checks and couple of day checks. So we fast forward into December really, and throughout that period. And again, Cara was going in through some checks in the hospital, and then they'd noticed that it was early stages of preeclampsia, to the point that she was admitted, and then they said at 29 weeks that an emergency C-section would be required. So at that point it was, oh shit, if I'm honest. So we had known all the way up to that point that, well, when she was born, and her name is Alessa Eve Green. So when Alessa was born, we knew that she's likely to be early and therefore would go into neonatal. And that's what we were gearing ourselves towards, that battle, which in itself is a complete minefield, you know. But obviously we go through to the 9th of December, and the surgery goes ahead, and we've still got pictures of us before that surgery, still in that kind of anticipation and excitement phase. But unfortunately that quickly changed. Alessa was born by C-section, and she came out and she was crying and everything from that, but quickly they took her into the side room because they ultimately couldn't sustain her life in that sense, and they couldn't resuscitate her to the point. So from that point we had a very odd situation, which probably both of us, we cast our minds back and we can only remember snippets because it was very vague but very real, obviously, to the point where we expected the doctor to come back over with Alessa, but at that point they obviously gave us the tragic news that she'd passed. So that was a complete unexpected event that, whilst we were very aware and knowledgeable of the science behind the pregnancy and the complications, and there probably always was a real possibility of that happening clearly, we were optimistic, we were excited, we were going to fight the battle in neonatal, go through that point. But obviously that didn't occur. So unfortunately, she passed away shortly after birth. And it was due to various complications throughout the pregnancy, but ultimately fluid on the lungs, and they couldn't obviously sustain her life. So at that point it was very much, rug from under your feet, complete, don't know what to do, where are we? At that point Cara's still on the table, and numb from the waist down, obviously was cesarean, so you just instantly go into kind of comfort mode really, and between us just floods of tears and trying to work it out, really. Oh, yeah.
But a total uncontrollable situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a man that tends to get a hold of situations and control them.
100%, yeah.
Whether it's on the pitch or not.
Very structured and kind of, the type that has a to-do list, as I've got here with some notes, but we laughed about it before. But it's true, I generally am, I wouldn't say a control freak, but I like to be aware of what's going on, what I'm doing, and what probabilities may come of that. This was one of them, but we weren't naive to the fact. It was just simply, we hadn't, I suppose, delved into that beforehand, because we wanted to stick with the optimism, stick with we'll get through this, we'll battle it, the other end. But unfortunately that didn't occur.
Can you try and articulate from them onwards what kind of impact that had on you both, and how did you pick yourselves back up and move forward from there?
Yeah, so without going minute by minute into that environment, so you're in there and obviously you go through the remainder of the surgery because naturally you have to in that scenario, and your head is just all over the place, and you then go through to another room, and then you go into the recovery room, and at that point I remember there was a moment that we both just sat there not knowing what to say. It was complete shock and disbelief, but then it came to a point after a while of thinking, well, our close family know we're in here and they know why we're in here. We didn't tell everyone that we were going in for a cesarean because it was private, but our family did. And in my head, I'm thinking, it's probably been, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it's been since we were going in. They're going to be expecting us to give them the good news, because it's always good, isn't it? You know, of course, there's no one has any problems, and that's kind of the piece that you think about. So I do remember making those phone calls, and making those phone calls to my parents and my sister, and even Cara's parents and family as well, to, you know, they took the call with excitement, and that was a quick, no, you need to listen, you know, and then going through that piece, and it was a challenge, you know, to be able to just break that down, but we got there. People came in and they saw us, etc., and through. But from there to kind of afterwards, a lot of it was a blur. Few things I remember. Someone always told me it's the first time you do something after a trauma or an event that will be the hardest. So a couple of days later, maybe a week later, whatever it was, I can't remember, I needed to go shopping. Yes, this was probably pre-Deliveroo days, because it was 2013. And I was like, Cara can't, she's recovering at home. I can't fathom going to myself. Because people knew she was pregnant. So the first question they're going to ask if they see me by myself, how's Cara, how's the baby? So I asked my sister to come with me. And I remember going around Sainsbury's, you know, I probably, without noticing, probably had a hood up and, almost a balaclava on, really, just to get in, get out. And that isn't to say that, you know, my sister wouldn't and Claire wouldn't have gone for me. It was more of a case for me, I think, to get out and to get back to a bit of, a bit of normalisation, really, to do something. Fortunately, we didn't see anyone on that journey, on that day. We did other times that was difficult as well, because again, this is something that I kind of want to share because it's important in terms of people from both sides being aware, people that have gone through the trauma or a trauma, and people that know people have gone through it as well. And we had instances where people would, you know, come up to us and just give you a big hug. It was lovely. Don't say anything, just a big hug. Other people would want to delve into it for their understanding, which again is fine. Some people would come and would literally be in floods of tears and then almost walk, and then we were left there thinking, sorry, we done something wrong? What's just gone on there?
Brilliant.
Thanks for that. Cheers, see you later. And other people that not just metaphorically but physically cross the road. And that's always stuck with us, because that's you dealing with your inability to process that, whereas we are in the worst moment of our lives. And we didn't need to see you, but we definitely didn't need to see you cross the road.
Because we did see that.
Because we did see that, exactly. And you know, when you catch someone's eye, and you just know in those scenarios. So what comes out of that is ultimately you know who's close to you and who's not, in that sense.
Yeah, and I suppose it's about having that ability to just try and offer something. It's not about you, offer something for that other person in that moment.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is if you know, we know you know, so just acknowledge it. Don't ignore that and have that all, and it's not an awkward conversation, it's kind of difficult to say it, but it's double negative, don't not ask the question. Don't not say something, because by doing that you actually say a lot more in a very, very negative way. So if you don't talk about it, you just bypass it. What you can just say is, I'm really sorry to hear your news, that's really shit. I'm sorry to hear your loss. That's great. And move on. But to do the opposite, it has a very, very negative effect on that. And we probably lost some people in our circle because of that,
Yeah, you will.
to be honest. Because you just think, well, it's not about you. I can assure you it's not about you. It's not about you. But yeah, I mean, time passed, very, very challenging time. And you recall stuff and you probably, I can't remember the word, decompartmentalize it or put bits away in your brain. I can't think.
Decompartmentalise.
Maybe that'll do it. Thank you. Never going to get that out.
Put that dictionary
exactly.
away.
Yeah. Well done. And you just lock it away. You
That's
just
trauma
keep
as
it
well,
away.
isn't it?
Exactly. And then you deal with that maybe in time, or you don't. In that point of it as well. But yeah, very, very stressful times and difficult times, and coming back to the first time we do everything, going back into work. The first time of that, because of very realisation. Everyone knew why I was off, everyone knew what had happened, and then everyone knew why I was coming back. And again, some people said something, other people didn't. Yeah, and again, you have those relationships through. Same when I returned back to rugby. And that was, something I'll touch on, but was definitely an outlet for me to... The first time I came back was nervous, very, very nervous. I don't need to be nervous, but it was, because you're nervous of how people are going to react, which is something out of all of this I'd like to say to people that were in my shoes of, don't worry about that. That is not your worry. Yeah, that is their worry, so to speak, because I probably guarantee they were more nervous. Yeah. But you probably manifest it in your head, build it up as well. But within a couple of minutes, just, you find you're back into it and back into it. And I was very fortunate in the sense that I had an outlet in a physical game where within the rules of the game, I could
Get away with it all.
legally hit someone. So yeah, I had a way to release some anger.
Therapy almost.
A way of it, for sure. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
And I hear that a lot. That was our opportunity to vent the anger, vent the frustration.
Yeah.
Almost take it out on yourself a little bit. There's an element of I just want to get smashed and I just want to feel.
Yeah, it was.
Being human.
Absolutely. And I within training and games there was that element of it. But even just for me, I've always been very sporty. But just going for a run. And, there were several times that I'd just go out for a run by myself and sometimes not even put the radio on or tunes on just to get out and get in your own head, so to speak. And then probably, in the middle of a field, just scream at a load of cows, and that's nothing to do with them. But just to vent, just to sometimes just release. And that's sometimes what I think is important.
Yeah, and I think that's what I want to get to before we kind of move on. Looking back, 10, 12 years on, looking back, what advice would you give people who are in that situation of experiencing that horrendous loss, but also the people who are within the network? You've just alluded to it a little bit there, but what would the key little bits of advice you would give someone who's in that situation?
Yeah, I suppose first thing is give yourself a break. It's hard to do, but give yourself a break in the sense of you can't fathom what has happened in that scenario. You're just dealing. You're just in the day-to-day situation, and you just it's almost survival mode, really. You're just going through. We've done today, and well done, and tomorrow we'll try again. Yeah. And that's all it is. It's a try, because you don't get better. You don't get solved with this. You don't forget. Someone always said time doesn't heal. It just allows you the opportunity to get more used to the situation. And we generally do believe that, because the longer things go, it's still incredibly raw and very much in the forefront of our minds. But equally, we're not as affected emotionally now than we were then. And what I mean by that is when we think of a scenario and whatever, like back then, it would, floods of tears, instant, couldn't do what I'm doing now, and both of it, myself and Cara, we couldn't talk about it because it was that raw. But as part of our process and part of the help that we saw, both professionally and even with our friends and family, is we actually benefited from talking and benefited from being able to speak knowledgeably and open. Open and honest, I think I said at the start, because we found that was part of our healing as well, and I definitely would advocate that. When you feel comfortable, and that is a big bit. There's no rush, there's no time frame, there's no structure to this, there's no to-do list. Yeah, it's whatever time frame and works well with you, and at some point in time. That could be 20 years or it could be 2 hours. It really doesn't matter. It's just having that ability with a circle of people that you trust to be able to do that.
Yeah, because that's for you.
Yeah.
Not for anyone else. You access that if and when.
Absolutely.
So, moving on from there, it doesn't stop there.
Afraid not, no, unfortunately not. So.
The resilience was pushed a little bit further.
Yep, certainly was. So out of that process and with the kind of treatment plan and everything else, we went through a series of things with the hospital, checks, make sure her car is okay, etc., which it was in the end. And then, you know, we eventually got to a point where we thought we would try again, for which we did, because, you know, to expand our family, and Alessa was very much part of our family but wasn't there to be part of our family, so very much in our memories in that sense, and obviously our thoughts, but we wanted to create more of a family and widen the family. So again, like what we did just after we got married, we thought, yeah, we'll try, we'll conceive, we'll be okay. And if you recall what I said before, we were lucky enough to conceive. And I do attribute luck to a mass amount of conception, because it is. And often we hear, you know, people are pregnant, fantastic news. When's the baby due? I'm going to have a baby in April, for example. And our instant thing, probably more so back then than it is now, is you might. Yeah, and that sounds really negative and harsh, but it's the true reality. Because before our situation, we were in the vision of, you know, she'll be born and everything will be fine. And it's good for people to be optimistic, but we had the realisation setting that you let's work towards that date, but nothing is guaranteed, and life tells you that, doesn't it, to be fair. So we went through now a process of you know, trying to conceive again. And fair to say, it did not go according to our plan. And here we have a 10-year window. So you're talking about resilience, but a 10-year window here of the inability to conceive again. Yeah, which for anyone that's been through or gone through, or know people going through fertility issues, is so hard, like devastating. Like, it's not just when you do a pregnancy test and you're not. It's, you know, it's the before, the during, the afters, the in-betweens, everything. And the elation that you have for other people that announce their pregnancies and their births, and then all of a sudden you don't get invited to a birthday party. But if we had Alessa, we would have been. Yeah. And equally, I get how that works, you know, in that world. And often people think, oh well, you know, we didn't want to talk about it because we didn't want to remind you. And we've said to people quite open and honestly that I can assure you, we know about it, and we are constantly thinking about it. So you mentioning something or inviting us to something isn't going to refresh us, By you not doing something like that, that will hurt more, and it comes back to the people crossing the road. Trigger again, So without going line by line, year by year, we went through a period and entered into medical assistance via IVF. Probably a bit, you know, wide-eyed on that, and knowing that it had, and, you know, people would make comments, oh, it worked for them. Great. That doesn't mean it's going to work for us, you know. But again, people trying to give that element of hope and that it is going to work. And we still went into that. Six times it went. And we went through a course over 10 years, and on the 6th time it was successful, which again, the amount of pregnancy tests we did that were negative, we got into that cycle of, okay, dust ourselves off, we go again. You know, we try again. Do we try again? In between that 10 years, there were various points where we thought, stop. And for a period we did, for a good period we did, because mentally, it was just mental fatigue, absolute mental fatigue, for individually and collectively for us both, because you just can't keep going on that cycle of hope, disappointment, hope, disappointment.
Yeah.
It just grinds you down. As well as life being in the middle of everything else. So you've got work, you've got other commitments, you've got friends, you've got family, you've got holidays, you've got rugby, lots of other external factors. But for us, for that piece was very much up and down, very much up and down. But we did, we fast forward and we've now very, very fortunate to say we've got Ezra, who's 18 months, absolute little whirlwind, and certainly keeping us on our toes. And he is the little brother to Alessa, and will always be that in that sense. But again, to come back, we were very fortunate, very lucky in that piece. It worked for us in this time. Some people it will work first time, other people it unfortunately won't, and we do know that and understand that. So that's why we are so fortunate with it. But to say it was a journey is a bit of an understatement, and it certainly was not smooth. So coming back to that resilience was, and that's why I wanted to get the point of, for a time we did stop, because we simply couldn't keep going, go fail. You're not in that right headspace. But would we have gone another time if this didn't work? I don't know. Honestly, you can't answer that. We're very lucky to where we are, but it was certainly testing. Certainly testing.
As a couple as well.
Yeah. Big time.
If a red letter comes through the doorstep for some couples, they might have a bit of an implode. But you surely must look at things now and think, not much can.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. We were throughout it was, we were very close anyway. Very, very close as well. But there's certain elements throughout that you look back on now that could have been breaking points. And there is a few statistics, I don't know, but in terms of couples that do break up after the loss of a baby, because let alone the conception side of it, and the fertility treatment side, because that in itself, wow. But in terms of the loss of a child, because the one person you loved the most, you could easily turn that love to anger and resentment and pitch against each other. We didn't. We went the other way, which obviously we're very pleased that we did. But that didn't come without help. It didn't come without help. Not straight away, but as part of our process, we were offered help, and we sought help by external counsellors, which again, I would, when people are ready, advocate that very much so. Someone impartial that weirdly just lets you talk. And I remember the first time we went to one, and both of us, you see probably shrinks in American TV series and stuff, and you think they're going to sit there and just jot down notes and ask you loads of questions. And first time we sat there, and we were both probably very, very nervous, and she just simply looked at us and said, what would you like to talk about? And at that point was just the definite, what? We thought you were going to tell her. Yeah, exactly. And it was just completely flipped it on its head. But equally, we just went, straight away. And we just got talking. It was quite funny, I tell a story, because often you'd sit opposite, sit next to Cara, for example, and you'd speak to Cara via the counsellor. And she would look at me and just speak to her, just speak to her, she's right there. But often you do, because that's just the way you are, until you're talking about something. But I think really that did help us for our relationship and other relationships as well, because we were able to then verbalise how we were feeling, whether we were happy, we were sad, we were angry, we were disappointed, we were completely upset, whatever it would be. But a big thing for me, and probably one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, is the in control piece, the optimist, everything will be okay. So rewind back to it just after, obviously, the news of Alessa, and probably all the fertility treatments through it as well, was an instant arm round hug, consolement. It'll be okay, we'll be all right. Without knowing that it would be all right, so there was an element there that it was very, probably tiring on me to do that, but then I would come and I'd run around out here, or I'd go for a run, or I'd do something to preoccupy my mind from almost dealing with that element of it as well. But unfortunately, what that did do, by me being that kind of helpful, trying to help, trying to resolve, is it almost pushed a wedge between me and Cara, because she wasn't seeing me be upset or angry or scared or all of them combined, even though I was, and I was doing it perhaps behind closed doors. And that is something that out of the counselling allowed Cara to tell me, for me to understand it, because in my head I had thought, I don't need to burden her with any of my issues because I'll just deal with them. She's got enough to go on with. I'll just keep it close to me and I'll just do something with that at a point in time. Thinking that was a protective, nurturing thing, when in reality, Cara was thinking, I'm by myself. I don't know what to do. I need help. I need to know he's in as much pain as me. Is it just me? Am I worse than him? So, you know, in that scenario, the mindset piece. So a big part of that was then me being aware and then just being open and just actually being more open in my communication and honestly showing when I was upset, when I was pissed off, when I was angry, and all of those above, and equally when I was happy. You know, it's not all negative here, far from it, but to be very transparent in how I was, rather than thinking, right, I'll just show a perception of me because the other bit, she doesn't need to have that on her burden, and that piece. But that was a big thing, and a big thing for our relationship then going forward, because certainly used it a few times afterwards as well.
And how do you think that's stayed with you, that belief of need to be open, transparent, honest, not just with Cara, but with all your multiple roles now as a dad, as a friend, as a leader, as a colleague? Yeah,
it's to be fair, and that's quite a lot that I do with my job now, is I've got a team of 9, and I think if I just toe the corporate line of this is what we want to do, this is what we've been told, let's just do it, people see through that. And equally, you're not necessarily their mate, you know, in that peer-to-peer level, but you can give your opinion. Yeah, you can give your assumption of the situation and also put your slant on it. And that's where the difference between like a manager and a leader, and that piece. Got to be able to do it with them naturally, but also is just say, yep, you know, this is what we've been told, whatever the scenario this is what we've been told, this is my opinion, this is what I think we should do. Does everyone agree? Is everyone, you know, let's consult, let's speak about it, and then let's agree and move forward, Sometimes in life you have to be told what to do, and you do it, of course it is. And it's not always the case that you have it as a debate, but I think showing your openness and showing your feelings was quite a big thing, to be fair. And I remember back in the COVID pandemic, because was travelling, was work from home, everyone, as we know, resorted to home straight away. And there was something within our company that led to emotional fatigue, it was called. So you've got someone say, I've got COVID, or my nan's not very well, and all of that, and you just absorb. And that's probably what I did instantly, similar to all the other stuff that's going on. Just absorb it. And then I read this article and read this video around it, and then realised that I was just absorbing people's problems without, one, being able to impact it and change it, and 2, not dealing with my own. So you're only one person. Yeah. There's only so much you can do, in fairness. So it was a case of understanding, almost reading the room in that piece, to what you can take on, sympathise with people, understand, but equally you can't tell people what to do. But also being that, you know, I keep saying open and honest. There's always a point, there's always a point. So tell a few white lies to get Ezra to go to bed. Of course I do. Why wouldn't I do? I'm a parent, without a shadow of a doubt. And I'll tell him that the ice cream van, you know, when they played the sirens, that's because they've run out. Yeah. Everyone's going to do that, of course.
You should get double glazing. So
exactly. So, you know, those little white lies, in that piece. But I think generally speaking, you can just be open with people, and I think they respect it more. And that's a big part, is respect, to be honest. You know.
Well, Sean, you mentioned your name around these parts, and respect is the one thing that pops up. Well, I want to go back. You mentioned something before, and I think it's not a conversation that's had. IVF, fertility from a male perspective.
Mm.
What advice would you give fellas who are going through that from a partner's perspective, having that disappointment? What advice would you give them looking back in hindsight now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So my perspective of it, and my journey through that piece was, one, you don't necessarily talk about it in terms of IVF, People maybe suspect you're going down an IVF route, but you generally don't ask people, in that sense. If you do tell people, very funny, because they want to know everything. And you're like, if we weren't doing that and we were conceiving naturally, I don't think you'd be asking when we're doing it. How did we do it? Where did we do it? But that's what people want to know, the finite details to it. Oh, you've got an appointment, oh, it's this. Because you're almost building up their anticipation levels. And again, through our journey, we chose to keep it for us because it was for us, And even this is family, but a lot of my friends probably wouldn't know the level of what we went through because it is private and it's our journey and our piece. And also we quickly wanted it just to be about us, because not that Alessa was a disappointment for other people, but there was a proportion that we felt, throughout it, that we didn't achieve what we wanted to, and we didn't, unfortunately, give people another grandchild or a niece or a nephew, in that world as well. So it was a case of, we weren't labelled with that, but we didn't want to set people's expectations. This one's going to work, because clearly, 6 times or 5 times it didn't. So it was a case of, our resilience was kept in-house. But for a male perspective, you don't talk about it even more. And what I mean by that is I've known family and friends that have gone through it afterwards, but when you're in the middle of it, generally you don't talk about it, which can be deemed as negative, in that sense, and you can be open about most things, but sometimes you think, I just want to keep that for me, keep that for my piece. Females not necessarily, but they can sometimes be a bit more open, because down the kind of the medical route and other, depends how wide the circle is and who you feel comfortable about speaking to as well. But for men, I think not to think you are alone, to seek out if you do feel that you're unsure. And, between myself and Cara, we probably pestered the doctors a lot in the sense of getting an understanding. And Cara in particular was phenomenal at that. She was very kind of scientific, like she's got a general interest in science, so it's a case of she would almost know what the doctors were going to say beforehand, like what her levels were, what tests, what medication she needed. So that really helped me to have her steer through, again coming back to like a control plan, all of that. Cara really took the lead on that piece. But I would say for any people that are going through it, if you're unsure, just ask. Don't be led down a path that you don't know where you're going. And a big part, again, coming back to the trust, is, we trusted our doctors and the worst happened. And then we trusted them subsequently afterwards, and 5 times it didn't happen, So you're like, how resilient can you be in that world? You're trusting people that is their job to get it right, but trying to, no slight on those individuals, but that in itself is an absolute mammoth task. If someone is there to sell something, they either sell it or they don't. Within the medical profession, there's so many variables that can happen, clearly, and some catastrophic. So you kind of, you take the information that you're given, but it's important, I would say, for people to educate themselves so that they know what scenario they're in and what they're into as well. So
take us back to another challenge, huge challenge in 2018.
Fast forward a couple of years in between some of our cycle and things that we were going through, myself and Cara. So another event that happened with our family, which was completely out of the blue. So it was in June 2018. So my sister Michelle, who was 37 at the time, had been absolutely fine in her life, it's fair to say. No health issues, no concerns, no anything from that. She'd been an air hostess for many years, travelled the world, and she used to refer to herself as a lifesaver in the sky. So We always laugh about that. But she loved her job. She was brilliant at her job and had a husband and two small children as well. And then, yeah, I think it was a Saturday, maybe a Friday or Saturday. She just had a bit of a shortness of breath out of nowhere, and kind of probably thought it was maybe a panic attack at first, but not 100%. So rightfully went into A&E and through to that cycle, and then she was admitted. And at that point, they were just doing a series of tests, checks and balances tests, and kind of have been into hospital, out of hospital, in and out. But then, yeah, kind of 2 weeks later, on the 30th, she unfortunately passed away from what's referred to as a PE, or I can never say this right, but a pulmonary embolism, which just completely rocked us, yeah, as a family, individual, but as a collective. And we're a very close family, between mum, dad, my older sister Claire, and then my middle sister, so to speak, is Michelle and me. But equally then through to Cara and our wider family as well. So that was completely unexpected. And still remember that day quite vividly. So Cara was actually away that weekend because we'd not known anything that there was any issue. Yeah, she was going through tests, and the week leading up to the Saturday, the week probably, can't remember what day, maybe the Monday or the Tuesday, she was admitted just for a bit more observation and checks. And Cara knew she was away. She was actually on a hen weekend that weekend. So on the Thursday, I think it was, she went to see Michelle, which we're ever so grateful that she did, and I did throughout the week as well. And she was in fine spirits, sharing WhatsApps and pictures, and basically she was leading the nurses, telling them what to do, in true fashion, and how shit the food is. But that's typical Shell. And then on the Saturday, we'd agreed, me and Claire, because obviously Cara was away, we'd agreed we'd go and walk the dogs. So we had two dogs, or they had a dog, I had a dog. So we'd go and walk the dogs. We knew Mum and Dad were going in that morning, and Hayden, her husband, was going in to obviously see her. And we were 30 yards, maybe 40 yards away from Claire's house, and she's got a big field, Claire, my older sister, just with the dogs. And I realised my phone had vibrated, got it out, and I was like, oh, Dad called, it was a missed call. And then instantly, as I told Claire, her phone rang, and it was Dad. And he just got to the hospital with Mum, and he said, you need to get here now. And at that point, we just completely, I don't know if we spoke really, me and Claire, was kind of, what do you mean get here now? And he says, you need to get here now. And ultimately, at that point, the doctors were trying to resuscitate her. So I can't really fathom that journey that I drove to the hospital. I think it was safe enough. But at that point, we were both hysterical, but also not knowing what the situation was. And we'll get there, it'll be all right. We'll get there. We'll get there. We did eventually get there. And it's only Nantwich to Leighton, I don't know, 4 miles, 5 miles, something like that. But yeah, we got there, and obviously then you run through to the ward, obviously where she was, the cardiac ward at that point, and respiratory ward, and then yeah, we walked down that ward, and you could just have a feeling, to be honest, and yeah, and then obviously the doctors had made us aware. Yeah, it's fair to say made us aware, which didn't seem real, and at that point was utter disbelief, and no, this isn't happening, this can't happen. Well, hold on, she was fine, I spoke to her 2 days ago. But it was that from nothing, well, there was obviously underlying things, yeah, goes without saying, but no one knew of that 2 weeks prior. You wouldn't have known. If she didn't go to A&E, they wouldn't have uncovered what they did. But obviously then on that Saturday in the morning was just a case of complete, just again, world upside down from nothing, yeah, that we didn't know about. But then your mind gets racing, yeah. So I was like, I've got to tell Cara, I've got to tell her. So I did, called her, and then she came straight back. She was in Bath. But obviously she was distraught as well. She just utter disbelief. But then I've got my mum and dad sitting there, my sister, a brother-in-law that was on the way as well, and a niece and nephew for Claire's side. And then we've got Michelle's husband and the two girls. and they weren't there because fortunately he'd arranged for them to have childcare that morning, but your just head is spinning at that point, absolutely spinning. Then you got wider family, you know, and you just, at that moment, you're kind of almost overwhelmed, well, completely overwhelmed, because you just don't know which way to turn and what to do. And then we just went through quite a range of emotions in what seemed to be a short space of time. Basically, we were in a side room and they'd put us in there, and it was, you know, tears, I'd probably say tears and not tantrums, but anger, absolute anger, rage of what has happened and what have they missed, what have they done, what have they not done. You know, blame is ultimately what you're looking for in that scenario. But it materialised, you know, and I can speak about it now because obviously time has gone, but, you know, it was an unexpected tragedy that you couldn't have predicted that. You know, you couldn't have predicted that. And that's why I wanted to mention about this as well. This certainly isn't, woe is me, look how shit my life has been, because I've had some, and will have, some fantastic things happen to me. But there's two different elements of trauma here that I wanted to share, and obviously loss and resilience. And this was one that, you know, anyone could die at any time. You know, could have been a car accident, could have been something, could have been a plane accident, you know, having been an air hostess. But this was certainly something that we'd all led to think, she'll be all right, she'll just, you know, they'll give her some medication, she'll be okay, we'll get through it. But clearly that didn't happen. Yeah, that didn't happen. So, yeah, pretty tough. Pretty tough.
Talk to me a little bit about the impact that had on you, because obviously this is your second unexpected loss.
Yeah.
And you are a man, even now, still the optimist, so trying to control the uncontrollable. So what impact does that have on you from then and time onwards?
Yeah. I think at that very moment, I remember the room, remember the ward, I remember everything, to be honest. I've obviously with rugby been to that hospital quite a few times for various different injuries and broken bones. But that ward in particular, I will never forget, obviously. And I remember going outside and I was putting in a few phone calls to help mum and dad, to tell some of our close family and obviously Cara I'd spoken to. And at one point, I think I'd just done one and I just lay on the floor. It was really weird. It was obviously a relatively nice day, but just kind of almost went a bit fetal and kind of just curled up a little bit, just as obviously just bawling out, you know, and just letting my emotions out, because I think before that it was just kind of, you know, fight or flight mode, really. You know, you're angry, you're upset, you don't know, but right, we need to do something. We need to get back into control. How can I get into control of something that I cannot control, simply cannot? So at that point, it was immediate kind of defence piece, but then kind of over that and over time, it certainly, again, for me, I had the first time of doing everything. So the first time of going to, you know, the supermarket or going out in town and someone say, oh, how's Shell? Yeah, you know, or coming back to rugby. And I remember we were training over in the Cabbage Patch. Don't know why, but I just do. I think it would have been pre-season. And everyone was great. Everyone knew, yeah, because I'd already told people, but everyone was understanding. And, you know, the majority of lads just came over and just went, oh, I'm really sorry. Yeah, very sorry. And that was it. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm here now for an hour and a half to forget about that. Thank you, but let's go and beat the shit out of each other. Yeah, exactly. And it was, and that for me was my release. Maybe the 40-minute here and the 40-minute journey home wasn't, you know, I'd resort back to that, and then you'd go back into that moment. But that's why for me, sport and exercise is so important for me, just for me, and for others possibly, just to allow that little bit of escapism. Yeah, everyone's got their own ways they can do that. They can watch a film, or they can, you know, speak to people. For me, escapism was real. I've just taken myself away from that situation that I was in, and just focusing on a different task. Yeah, a different task. And I think that's, really important. But yeah, it was certainly tough. Very much she'll be remembered, always will be. Certainly a character, it's fair to say, and we often share many stories about her, because that's the important thing. I remember her and her life and her memory. Yes, it was cut short. Of course it was, yeah. But, you know, we move on. You know, life moves on, unfortunately.
You've gone through multiple traumas, challenges, highs as well. Alessa, an incredible kind of sporting career. I'm really interested to find out your perspective from a male point of view. And we haven't really tapped into, but for me, a big theme throughout all of these podcasts is vulnerability. And how do we develop our understanding of vulnerability? So, in hindsight, looking back, if you were to give advice to your 20-year-old self right at the start of this journey before things got real, what advice would you give yourself, and what advice would you give young men on that journey towards adulthood in this rapid world in which we live in?
Yeah, indeed. I'm not a reader of books. Carl always laugh. I always watch a film. Yeah, so there isn't a film on this, but there's a book called "It's Okay Not to Be Okay." Yeah, and that title for me stood out because it is okay not to be okay. You cannot be the optimist. You cannot be everything will be fine, and you go through life. It's an experience that you've had, and a lot of them are forced upon you. I think it's fair to say, but it is a life experience, and life isn't easy. So, you know, it's a case of acknowledging what has happened. Give yourself a break. I think I mentioned before, and ultimately seeing how you can deal with that. Yeah, that doesn't mean that you deal with that by yourself and you suffer in silence, and suffer is a key thing here. But it's understanding if you are vulnerable, and it's probably a key bit. What is vulnerability? For me, is a case of it's not a weakness. Far, far from it. It's the opposite, ultimately. To put your hand up and say, I'm struggling, I'm finding this hard, I could do with some help. That is unbelievable, to have that confidence to do that and have that understanding of yourself, I think, is the key thing. And I do get people's mental state. They might not be in that position, yeah. And everyone will always say, I wish they had reached out to me. I wish they'd had done that. Sometimes people can't see that because you know, it's like tunnel vision. That's in their mindset. But over time, and if they know their network is there, they might reach out. And that'll be in various different ways. It won't always be, I need help. Yeah. So I think for people and individuals is to, you know, again, give yourself a break. Understand the situation that you're at. Vulnerability is not a weakness, and it is not anything that you should be ashamed or you know, frightened of. It's daunting. Shit, yeah, of course it is. It's one of those things that, you know, I can see why it would eat up people. But at the same time, if you seek professional help, or you seek help with a friend or a stranger, it doesn't really matter. I think it's just having that openness to say, do you know what, I could do with some help.
Mate, what a conversation. You'll know that at the end of all of our podcasts, we ask all our guests for their little blackbird worm of wisdom. Now,
Yeah.
you've alluded to it a little bit there, but
Yeah.
what would be your worm of wisdom?
Well, this is the big thing, isn't it? It's a big crescendo. So I thought long and hard about this. I do have two. So I'll cheat a little bit. But the first one is for people going through the situation is try, and try is the key word here, because this isn't for me to tell people what to do, but try and be open and honest and communicate. So those three things. Open means you can just open up about how you're feeling, what is upsetting you, what's angering you. Honest is being honest with yourself first before with other people. Not everyone needs to know this situation. I mean, and again, when this podcast comes out, a lot of my friends won't have known all of this because that's us, that's my life. But I wanted to share it now and communicate with the right people at the right time when you're ready. Yeah, not forced. There's no timeline, there's no script, there's no to-do list on this. Just do it when you're ready and when you're comfortable. And I think the main thing is know that someone will help. Don't ever think that someone won't, because someone will. If you ask the right people, you'll get the right answers. Yeah. And then my other bit is, the other slant is for people who know someone that has gone through an element of trauma, whatever that is in life, is, I think I said the double negative is, don't not ask the question, or don't not ask that statement. And what I mean by that is acknowledge it. Say, look, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to hear your loss. Don't pry, don't be nosy, but just acknowledge it. And that will go so much. Yeah, go so much. And offer a hand and say, look, really sorry that situation, but if you ever want to talk about it, I'd really like that. Yeah.
Well, Shawnee, I'm definitely in a position where I'm feeling really grateful that you've had this conversation.
Thanks, yeah.
I know it won't have been easy, but I know so many people will resonate with that, and you absolutely epitomise the word resilience. And I'm very humbled that we've had this conversation. So thanks very much, pal.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me too.
I hope you enjoyed Tackling It Together, brought to you by Little Blackbird. If you did, then please hit the subscribe button and give us a follow on our socials, Little Blackbird Limited. Also, please give us a like and comments on any thoughts that you may have. Let's get these important topics out there and encourage some meaningful, authentic conversations. See you next time. Cheers, and remember, keep smiling.